The wind came first. It always did out here, like the land needed to remind you it was boss before it showed you anything else. Caleb Rourke stood on his porch, coffee going cold in his tin cup, watching the horizon turn the color of an old bruise. Storm rolling in from the west, moving fast, the kind that didn't ask permission. He'd seen worse. Hell, he'd survived worse. But something about this one felt different, heavier maybe, like it was carrying more than just rain. "Gonna be a rough one," he muttered to nobody. The nearest neighbor was 12 miles east, and Caleb preferred it that way. People complicated things. People asked questions, wanted favors, brought their problems to your door like gifts you never asked for. The ranch wasn't much. 200 acres of stubborn dirt, a barn that leaned left when the wind pushed hard enough, and a house he'd built himself from timber that fought him every nail of the way. But it was his. Paid for in sweat and years of breaking his back, of fixing what broke before it destroyed him. That was the rule out here. Fix it or lose it. Caleb drained the last of his coffee, bitter and thick, and set the cup on the railing. The horses were already restless in the corral, sensing the storm the way animals do, something deeper than sight or sound. Some old instinct humans forgot how to hear. He needed to secure the barn doors, check the fence line on the north pasture where posts had been working loose. Maybe an hour of work if he moved quick. The storm would give him 2 at most. Then he heard it. Faint. Almost lost under the wind's low howl. But there, a sound that didn't belong. Caleb went still, head cocked, listening past the creak of wood and the distant thunder rolling closer. A horse, single rider, moving erratic, stumbling. His hand dropped to the revolver on his hip, instinct older than thought. Nobody rode this far out without reason, and reason out here was usually trouble wearing different faces. The rider came into view maybe 300 yards out, silhouetted against that bruised sky. Horse moving slow, head down. The figure on its back swayed like they were barely holding on. Caleb watched, calculating. Could be a trap. Could be desperation. Either way, not his problem. He turned back toward the barn. The horse stumbled, the rider fell. Damn it! He stood there, jaw tight, everything in him saying to walk away. This was how it started. You helped once, and suddenly you owned someone else's disaster. He'd seen it happen. Good men pulled under by someone else's weight. But he was already moving, crossing the yard in long strides, grabbing a rope and canteen from the barn. The wind hit harder now, carrying the first cold drops of rain, fat and heavy. By the time he reached the fallen rider, the storm was opening up for real. The horse, a roan mare, good stock but run too hard, stood nearby, flanks heaving, reins dragging in the dirt. The rider lay face down, one arm twisted beneath them, not moving. Caleb crouched low, hand still on his gun, and turned the body over. Not a body. A woman. Young, maybe late 20s, dark hair plastered to a face gone pale as milk. Breathing, but shallow. Clothes torn and dusty, like she'd been riding hard through rough country. No obvious wounds he could see, but exhaustion had its own way of killing you out here. Her eyes fluttered open, dark brown, unfocused, and fixed on him with something between fear and defiance. "Don't," she whispered, barely audible over the wind. "Don't take me back." Then she was gone again, unconscious before he could ask back where. The rain came down in sheets now, turning dust to mud in seconds. Caleb looked at the woman, at the horizon, at the ranch that had been quiet and simple an hour ago. "Fix what breaks," he muttered, "before it destroys you." He scooped her up, lighter than he expected, all bone and grit, and started back toward the house, leaving the mare to follow or not. The storm swallowed them both, thunder cracking overhead like the sky was splitting open, and Caleb carried a stranger into his home, knowing full well he might be carrying in his own ruin. Inside, the house felt smaller with someone else in it. Caleb laid her on his bed, only bed in the place, and stepped back, dripping water onto the rough wood floor. She didn't stir. Out cold, her breathing still too shallow for comfort. He'd seen men die from exposure, from pushing too hard with nothing left in the tank. The body just quit, like a machine running out of fuel. She wasn't there yet, but she was close. He grabbed blankets from the chest, piled them over her, then went to stoke the fire in the stone hearth. The flames caught, reluctant, hissing at the wet wood, but eventually climbed higher, throwing heat and shadow across the small main room. Outside, the storm hammered the ranch like it had personal grievances. Wind screamed through gaps in the walls, rain drummed the roof in waves. This was the kind of weather that killed cattle, tore roofs clean off, reminded you how small you were against what the land could throw at you. Caleb moved through the familiar routine, checking windows, securing shutters, making sure nothing was loose enough to become a missile. The mare had followed them in and stood now in the barn, out of the worst of it. He'd see to her properly once the storm passed. When he came back inside, the woman was shivering despite the blankets. Not a good sign. He heated water on the stove, made something close to coffee, strong enough to wake the dead. If she could drink it, keep it down, that was a start. He pulled a chair close to the bed and sat, studying her face in the firelight. She was pretty in a hard-worn way, the kind of beauty that came with sharp edges. High cheekbones, strong jaw, a small scar above her left eyebrow. Her hands, resting on top of the blankets, were calloused, working hands. Whatever her story was, she wasn't some soft thing running from a broken engagement. "Who are you?" he said quietly, not expecting an answer. The storm raged on. Hours passed. Caleb dozed in the chair the way he'd learned to sleep in the saddle or against a tree, never deep, never fully gone. Out here, sleeping too hard got you killed. Sometime near dawn, when the rain had gentled to a steady drumming, her eyes opened. This time they were clearer, focused. She looked at the ceiling, the walls, the fire, then finally at him. "Where am I?" Her voice was rough, scraped raw. "My ranch," Caleb said. "Found you collapsed about half a mile out. Storm was coming. Didn't have much choice." She tried to sit up, winced, fell back. "How long?" "Most of the night. You were pretty far gone." She closed her eyes, jaw working like she was chewing on decisions. "I need to leave." "Storm's still out there. You're not riding anywhere in this." "You don't understand? Then help me understand." Caleb leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Who's chasing you?" Her eyes snapped open, sharp and wary. "What makes you think someone's chasing me?" Woman rides up half dead, first words out of her mouth are, "Don't take me back," then tries to run again the second she wakes up. Doesn't take a genius. She stared at him, measuring. Whatever she saw must have been enough because she exhaled slowly and some of the tension bled from her shoulders. "My name's Lena," she said. "Lena Varela. And you're right, someone's chasing me, more than one someone. And if they find me here, they'll kill you just for being in the way." Caleb nodded slowly. "Figured it was something like that." "You don't seem surprised." "Out here? Trouble's the only thing that travels this far." He stood, walked to the stove, poured 2 cups of the harsh coffee, handed her one. "Drink this. Then you can tell me whether I should be loading my rifle or saddling your horse." She took the cup with both hands, inhaled the steam, sipped carefully, made a face. "This is terrible." "Keeps you breathing. That's all it needs to do." A ghost of a smile crossed her face, gone as quick as it came. She drank again, grimacing, then set the cup aside. "There were 5 of them," she said, "maybe more by now, led by a man named Dalton Creech. You heard of him?" Caleb's expression didn't change, but something cold settled in his gut. Everyone within 200 miles had heard of Dalton Creech. Gun for hire, claim jumper, the kind of man who took what he wanted and burned the rest. The law didn't touch him because Creech made sure the law stayed bought. "I've heard," Caleb said carefully. "Then you know what kind of men they are." Lena pulled the blankets tighter. "My father owed them money. A lot of money. Borrowed it for the ranch, thought he could pay it back with a good season. But the drought killed that, and Creech doesn't take excuses. When my father couldn't pay, Creech took the land. My father tried to fight it, legally, I mean, lawyers, judges, paperwork. Didn't work. Creech owns the judges too." Her voice went flat, empty. "My father died 3 months ago. Heart gave out," the doctor said. "But I know better. Creech broke him piece by piece until there wasn't anything left to break." Caleb said nothing, just listened. The rain outside had softened further, the storm moving east, leaving behind that particular quiet that comes after violence. "Before he died," Lena continued, "my father told me where he'd hidden something. Papers, deeds, proof that the loan was fraudulent from the start, evidence that could bring Creech down if it got to the right people. He made me promise I'd get it out, get it to someone who could use it. And did you? She nodded. I got the papers, got them to a federal marshal in Prescott, man my father trusted. But Creech found out. His men came for me 2 weeks ago. I've been running since. They want you dead. They want me disappeared, she corrected. Dead's just the easiest way. But if I vanish without a trace, without anyone asking questions, that's even better for Creech. Clean, simple. Caleb walked to the window, looked out at the gray dawn breaking over the soaked land. The storm had passed, leaving everything dripping and muddy. By noon, the sun would bake it dry again, like the rain had never happened. You got family? Friends who'd take you in? Nobody Creech can't reach. That's why I kept moving, stayed off main roads, avoided towns. Thought if I could make it to the territorial line, maybe cross into New Mexico. She trailed off. Doesn't matter now. They're too close. I felt it yesterday. Knew they were gaining. That's why I pushed so hard, stupid. Should have rested the horse, rationed my strength, but I panicked. And ended up here. She agreed quietly. Caleb turned back to face her. Those papers you gave the marshal, they enough to put Creech away. If the marshal's honest and doesn't get bought off or scared off, yes. But that's a lot of ifs. How long you think before Creech's men find you here? Lena's hands tightened on the blanket. A day. Maybe less if the storm didn't cover my tracks as well as I hoped. They're good trackers. They won't quit. The room fell quiet except for the fire's crackle and the steady drip of water from the eaves. Caleb stood there, working through it, feeling the weight of a decision settling on his shoulders. He could put her back on the horse, send her on her way. Not his fight, not his problem. The smart play, the safe play. But he thought about his rule, fix what breaks before it destroys you. And he thought about what it meant to be the kind of man who turned away when someone needed help, even if helping cost you everything. There's a line camp about 30 miles north, he said finally. Old prospector's cabin, mostly abandoned. You could hole up there, wait for things to cool down. They'd find me. Yeah, Caleb admitted. Probably would. So what are you suggesting? He looked at her straight on, this stranger who'd brought trouble to his door, and made a choice he knew he'd probably regret. You stay here. We make them think you moved on, pass through. I've got some pull with folks in town. Enough that if I say I didn't see anyone, they might believe it. Buy you time to figure out your next move. And when Creech's men show up anyway and don't believe you, then we deal with it. He said it simple, like it was nothing, like he wasn't offering to stand between her and the kind of men who killed for breakfast. Lena studied him with those dark eyes, searching for something. Maybe lies, maybe weakness. Why would you do that? You don't know me. Don't owe me anything. No, Caleb agreed. But I know what it's like when the world decides you don't matter. When powerful men figure they can take what's yours and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. He paused. I've been there. Came out here to get away from it. Built this place from nothing because nobody could take from me what I never let them close enough to touch. And now you're letting me close. Now I'm making a choice. He moved toward the door. Get some rest. You're safe for the moment. We'll talk more when you're stronger. Caleb, he stopped, hand on the door frame. Thank you, Lena said quietly. He nodded once and stepped outside into the new morning, closing the door behind him. The next 2 days passed in uneasy quiet. Lena stayed mostly in the house, recovering strength, while Caleb went about the ranch work that never stopped, mending fence, checking cattle, the 100 small repairs the storm had gifted him. The mare turned out to be solid stock, responding well to rest and grain. Lena had taken care of the horse even while running herself into the ground. That said something about her. They didn't talk much. Lena wasn't the chatty type, and Caleb had lived alone long enough that silence felt more natural than noise. But sometimes in the evenings, sitting by the fire while rain continued to come and go in fits, they'd exchange words. Small things. Where she'd grown up, a ranch not unlike this one, 2 territories over. What her father had been like. Stubborn, proud, too trusting for his own good. She didn't cry when she talked about him, just went quiet, staring into the flames like they held answers. Caleb told her less, but she seemed to understand that too. Some stories didn't need telling. On the third morning, Caleb was in the barn fixing a broken stall door when he heard the horses in the corral start making noise. Not spooked exactly, but alert, watchful. He set down the hammer and moved to the barn door, staying in shadow. 3 riders coming up the main trail, moving easy, not rushed. Too far to make out faces, but close enough to see they rode like men comfortable with trouble. Caleb's jaw tightened. He walked back to the house, keeping his movements casual, unhurried. Lena was at the window, already watching. She'd gone pale. "You recognize them?" Caleb asked. "The one in front. That's Virgil Kane. Creech's right hand. If he's here, the others aren't far." "How many total?" "I saw 5 before. Could be more now." Caleb checked his revolver, made sure it moved smooth in the holster. "Stay inside. Don't show yourself unless I call for you. Understand?" "Caleb, you want to help. You stay hidden and stay quiet." He looked at her hard. "Trust me or don't, but if you don't, we're both dead." She nodded, jaw set, and moved away from the window. Caleb stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind him. The 3 riders were close now, maybe 50 yards out. He could see their faces, hard men, trail-worn, the kind who'd killed before and would again without losing sleep. The one Lena called Virgil Kane rode in front, tall and lean with a face like weathered boot leather and eyes the color of dirty ice. The 2 flanking him were younger, hungry-looking, hands resting too close to their guns. They stopped at the edge of the yard. Kane's gaze swept the ranch, taking it all in, the barn, the corral, the house behind Caleb, before settling on Caleb himself. "Morning," Kane said, voice like gravel in a bucket. "Morning," Caleb replied evenly. "Nice place you got here." "Serves." Kane smiled, no warmth in it. "We're looking for someone. Woman, late 20s, dark hair, riding a roan mare. You seen anyone like that pass through?" "When?" "Last few days. She'd be tired, running hard, probably not making much sense." Caleb shook his head. "Haven't seen anyone. Storm kept me close to home. Wasn't looking for company." "That's so." Kane leaned forward in his saddle, studying Caleb like a man examining a horse for soundness. "Mind if we look around, just to be sure?" "I do mind, actually." The 2 younger men shifted, hands dropping to gun butts. Kane raised a hand, easy gesture, and they stilled. "No offense meant," Kane said smoothly, "but the woman we're looking for, she's dangerous. Stole something valuable from our employer. We're just trying to recover property. Law's on our side." "Law's in Grafton, 30 miles east," Caleb said. "You got a warrant, you can ride there, get it signed, come back proper. Otherwise, you're on my land without invitation." Kane's smile didn't slip, but his eyes went colder. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, friend." "Not your friend, and my land, my rules." For a long moment, nobody moved. The horses shifted, leather creaked, wind moved through the grass. The younger men watched Kane, waiting for the signal. Finally, Kane straightened in his saddle. "We'll be back this way. If you happen to see this woman, might be worth your while to let us know. Our employer's generous with information that helps him." "I'll keep that in mind." Kane touched his hat brim, mockery in the gesture, and turned his horse. The other 2 followed. They rode out slow, making a show of not being rushed, and Caleb watched until they disappeared over the rise. Only then did he let out the breath he'd been holding. The door opened behind him. Lena stepped out, face still pale but steady. "They'll be back," she said. "I know. And next time they won't ask. They'll just take." "I know that too." She moved to stand beside him, both of them looking at the empty trail. "You should have let me go. Should have told them you saw me heading east." "Would that have stopped them?" "No," she admitted. "They'd have searched anyway, probably burned the place just to be sure." "Then we're no worse off." Lena turned to look at him, something fierce and desperate in her expression. "Why are you doing this, really? It can't just be because you know what it's like when powerful men take what's yours. There's more to it." Caleb was quiet for a beat. Then, 6 years ago, I had a ranch in Colorado. Smaller than this, but it was mine. Paid for it fair, worked it honest. Then a railroad company decided they wanted to run track through my land, offered to buy me out, but the price was a joke. When I refused, they brought in lawyers, judges, men with guns. Didn't matter what I wanted, didn't matter that it was legal robbery. They took it anyway. What did you do? Fought for a while. But you can't beat that kind of power, not when they own the law and the politicians and everything else that matters. So I took what little they gave me and ran. Came out here where nobody wanted the land bad enough to take it. He looked at her. I won't be run off again. And I won't let someone else get run off if I can stop it, even if stopping it costs me everything. Lena held his gaze, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Recognition. Two people who'd been ground down by the same kind of machine and refused to stay down. They'll kill you, she said softly. Maybe, but they'll have to work for it. Matab. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He sat by the fire, cleaning his rifle, checking ammunition, preparing for what he knew was coming. Lena sat across from him, wrapped in a blanket, watching the flames. Tell me about Creech, Caleb said. Not just what he did, who he is. Lena pulled the blanket tighter. Dalton Creech is methodical. He doesn't rage or lose control. He just decides what he wants and takes it, step by step, until there's nothing left to take. My father used to say Creech was like a locust plague. Once he arrived, everything turned to dust. How'd he get so powerful? Started small, lent money to struggling ranchers during the drought years, reasonable terms at first. Then, when they couldn't pay, he'd take the land, sell it to bigger outfits, use that money to lend more. Built an empire on other people's misery. Now he owns judges, sheriffs, half the territorial legislature. Men like Kane do his dirty work, and nobody stops them because nobody can, except maybe a federal marshal with the right evidence. If the evidence gets to trial, if the marshal lives long enough, if Creech doesn't buy his way out, or disappear witnesses. She shook her head. Too many ifs. Caleb set the rifle aside. You really think those papers can bring him down? I think they're the only chance anyone has. My father died trying to protect them. I'm not going to let that be for nothing. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, coyotes called to each other in the dark. We need a plan, Caleb said. Kane will be back, probably with more men. When they come, we can't just stand here and hope they leave. What are you suggesting? He was quiet, turning ideas over, testing them for weak points. Then slowly, a plan took shape. Crazy enough it might work, or crazy enough to get them both killed. Hard to say which. How long you think before Kane reports back to Creech? A day. Maybe 2 if he sweeps the area first. And how long before Creech sends more men? Not long. He'll want this finished. Caleb nodded. Then we've got maybe 3 days to change the game. How? He looked at her across the fire. This woman who'd brought chaos to his quiet life and laid out the craziest idea he'd had in years. When he finished, Lena stared at him like he'd lost his mind. You can't be serious. Dead serious. That's insane. It'll never work. You got a better idea? She opened her mouth, closed it, looked away. No, she admitted finally. But this, Caleb, this changes everything for both of us, forever. I know. And you're willing to do that? For someone you met 3 days ago? He stood, walked to the window, looked out at the dark land. I told you before, I won't be run off. And I won't let you be run off either. This might be the only way to make sure that doesn't happen. Or it might just get us both killed slower. That's possible too. Lena stood, moved beside him at the window. They stood there in silence, 2 people staring into darkness, balanced on the edge of a decision that would either save them or destroy them. Finally, she spoke. If we do this, there's no going back. I know. All right, she said quietly. Let's do it. Caleb turned to look at her, searching her face for doubt or fear. He found both, but underneath them, something harder. Determination. The same kind of stubborn strength that had kept her running when most people would have quit. Tomorrow morning, he said, we'll ride to town, find the preacher, and make it legal. And if Kane comes before then we do it at gunpoint if we have to. He almost smiled. Won't be the first shotgun wedding in these parts. Lena did smile at that, brief and sharp. You know this is insane, right? Yeah, Caleb agreed. But out here, insane and survival look pretty similar. They stood together at the window watching the night, and somewhere in the distance thunder rumbled. Another storm building, always another storm. But for now, in this moment, they had a plan. Crazy, desperate, maybe doomed to fail. But it was theirs, and they'd chosen it together. That had to count for something. Dawn came cold and sharp, the kind of morning that made you feel every year you'd lived and a few you hadn't yet. Caleb was already up, had been for hours, unable to sleep with what they were planning. He stood in the barn, checking the wagon they'd take to town, making sure the wheels would hold and the horses were ready. Lena appeared in the doorway, dressed in clothes she'd cleaned as best she could. Her hair was pulled back, face scrubbed, but there was no hiding the exhaustion around her eyes or the tension in her shoulders. You still want to do this? Caleb asked without looking up from the harness he was adjusting. Do I have a choice? There's always a choice. She walked closer, running her hand along the wagon's side. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, this is the only move that doesn't end with me dead in a ditch or you dead for helping me. Could be we both end up dead anyway. Could be, she agreed, but at least this way we go down swinging. Caleb straightened, met her eyes. In the early light filtering through the barn's gaps, she looked younger somehow, vulnerable in a way she hadn't before. But there was steel underneath. He'd seen it when she first woke up, seen it every day since. This woman had been running on nothing but willpower and spite for weeks, and she still hadn't broken. Town's 2 hours if we don't push too hard, he said. Preacher's name is Josiah Webb. Decent man, far as preachers go. Won't ask too many questions if we don't give him reason to. And if someone recognizes me, if word gets back to Creech before we're done, then we deal with it. Caleb picked up his rifle, checked it once more out of habit. But Grafton's not big enough for Creech to have eyes everywhere. Most folks there know me, know I keep to myself. They see me bringing a woman to town, they'll figure I finally got tired of being alone. That simple? People believe what makes sense to them. Lonely rancher finds a woman, decides to marry her quick before she changes her mind. That's a story they'll buy. Lena smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. And the truth? That you're marrying me to keep me alive and Creech's men from burning your ranch? Truth's overrated. Caleb moved to hitch the horses. What matters is what people believe. They worked in silence after that, preparing for the ride. Caleb packed his saddlebags with ammunition and dried food, enough for a few days if things went sideways. Lena watched, learning his rhythms, and after a moment started helping without being asked, checking straps, tightening buckles, moving like someone who'd done ranch work her whole life. Your father taught you well, Caleb said. Had to. It was just him and me after my mother died. No ranch hands we could afford, no help, so I learned everything, riding, roping, mending fence, doctoring cattle, all of it. She paused, hands still on the harness. He used to say a woman who could run a ranch didn't need a man to do it for her. Smart man. He was, until Creech got his hooks in. Her voice went flat. Then he was just desperate. Caleb understood that. He'd seen desperation do things to good men, turn them into shadows of who they'd been. His own father had gone that way, broken by bad luck and worse choices until there wasn't anything left but anger and whiskey. They finished the preparations and climbed onto the wagon. Caleb took the reins, clicked his tongue, and the horses moved forward, pulling them out of the yard and onto the trail that led to town. The land opened up around them, vast and empty, under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. This was the frontier in its raw state, beautiful and brutal, offering everything and nothing at the same time. You could make a life here if you were strong enough, lucky enough, or you could disappear without a trace, swallowed by distance and silence. They rode without talking much at first. The wagon creaked, wheels crunching over the dried mud from the storm, and Caleb kept his eyes moving, watching the horizon, the tree lines, any place trouble could hide. Lena sat beside him, equally watchful. You think they're following us? Kane, probably not yet. He'll wait for orders from Creech, but someone might be watching the ranch, seeing who comes and goes. So we're being followed. Most likely. She didn't look scared, just calculating. And when they report back that we went to town together, Went to see the preacher. They'll know what we did, but by then, it'll be too late. Will it? Lena turned to face him. Marriage doesn't make me bulletproof, Caleb. It doesn't change the fact that Creech wants me gone. No, Caleb admitted, but it changes the law. You're not just some woman passing through anymore. You're my wife, legally bound to my land, my property. Creech wants to take you, he has to go through me and every legal protection that comes with marriage. It makes things complicated for him. Or it just makes him kill us both. That's possible too. Lena shook her head, almost laughing. You know, most men trying to convince a woman to marry them make it sound more appealing. Most men are liars. This time she did laugh, short and sharp. Fair point. They crested a rise and Grafton came into view below, a scatter of buildings clinging to existence along a single main street. Maybe 200 people if you counted generous, most of them hard-working folks just trying to survive. The kind of town where everybody knew everybody's business, but also knew when to mind their own. Caleb guided the wagon down toward the main street, and as they got closer, a few people stopped to watch. Old Hank at the general store, standing on his porch with a broom. Martha Donnelly hanging laundry behind the boarding house. Young Tommy Chen running errands for the blacksmith. They all looked. Of course they did. Caleb Rourke didn't come to town often, and he'd certainly never brought a woman before. They're staring, Lena said quietly. Let them. Caleb pulled the wagon up in front of a small white building with a cross mounted above the door. Not fancy, just functional. The church served double duty as a schoolhouse and meeting hall, and Preacher Webb lived in a room built onto the back. They climbed down, and Caleb tied off the horses while Lena stood there, suddenly looking uncertain in a way she hadn't before. You all right? He asked. I'm about to marry a man I've known for 3 days to avoid being murdered by outlaws. I'm not sure all right covers it. Fair point, Caleb echoed her words from earlier, and that got a small smile from her. The church door opened and Preacher Webb stepped out, a tall man in his 50s with silver hair and kind eyes that had seen enough of life to know when not to pry. Caleb Rourke, Webb said, genuine surprise in his voice. Didn't expect to see you in town today. Preacher, Caleb nodded. Got a favor to ask. Webb's eyes moved to Lena, taking her in. The travel-worn clothes, the defensive posture, the way she stood close to Caleb like she was ready to run or fight depending on what happened next. And who's this? Lena Varela, Caleb said. We're here to get married. If Webb was shocked, he hit it well. His eyebrows went up just slightly, but his expression stayed neutral. I see. And when exactly did you two meet? Recently, Caleb said, offering nothing more. Webb looked between them, and Caleb could see him working through it. The sudden appearance, the rushed timeline, the tension neither of them could quite hide. The preacher wasn't stupid. He knew something was off. Question was whether he'd ask or just let it be. After a moment, Webb stepped back and opened the door wider. Come inside. Let's talk. They followed him into the church, a simple room with wooden pews and windows that let in the morning light. Webb closed the door and turned to face them, hands clasped in front of him. I'm going to ask you both something, and I want honest answers. He looked at Lena first. Are you being forced into this? Is someone threatening you? Yes, Lena said, and Caleb felt his stomach drop. But she continued. But not Caleb. He's trying to help me. The people threatening me are the reason we're here. Webb nodded slowly. And you, Caleb? You understand what you're taking on? I do. Marriage isn't something to enter lightly, especially not as a solution to danger. When the danger passes, if it passes, you'll still be married. You both understand that? Caleb glanced at Lena. She was already looking at him, that same searching gaze from the night before, asking the same question. Are you sure? He was. Or sure enough, which was as close as you got to certainty out here. We understand, Caleb said. Webb sighed, the sound of a man who'd seen too much hardship to judge people for the choices they made to survive it. All right, I'll perform the ceremony, but I'm going to need witnesses, and I'm going to need this done proper. If this marriage is going to protect either of you legally, it has to be beyond question. Who do you suggest? Hank from the general store and Martha Donnelly. They're discreet, trustworthy. They won't spread gossip if I ask them not to. Caleb nodded. I'll get them. He stepped outside, and the bright sun after the church's dimness made him squint. Across the street, Hank was still on his porch, pretending not to watch. Caleb walked over, boots heavy on the dusty boards. Hank. Caleb. Hank set down his broom, studying Caleb's face. Heard you bring a woman to see the preacher. Need you to witness a wedding. Hank's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. That's so. And I need you to keep it quiet, at least for a few days. Trouble following that girl? Caleb didn't answer, which was answer enough. Hank sighed, pulled off his apron. Let me get Martha. She'll want to be there anyway, and she's better at keeping secrets than I am. 10 minutes later, they were all gathered in the church, Caleb and Lena standing before Preacher Webb, with Hank and Martha as witnesses. Martha had taken one look at Lena and immediately softened, maternal instincts kicking in. She'd produced a small bouquet of wildflowers from somewhere, pressed them into Lena's hands. Every bride needs flowers, Martha said firmly. Lena took them, looking like she might cry but holding it back through sheer force of will. Thank you. Webb opened his Bible, cleared his throat. We're here to join Caleb Rourke and Lena Varela in marriage. This is a sacred bond, not to be entered into lightly. If anyone has objections, speak now. Silence. Just the sound of breathing and the creak of old wood settling. Caleb, do you take Lena as your wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, in sickness and health, till death parts you? Caleb looked at Lena, this stranger who'd become something else in just 3 days. I do. Lena, do you take Caleb as your husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, in sickness and health, till death parts you? She met his eyes, and for just a second Caleb saw fear there, not of him, but of what this meant, how final it was. Then her jaw set, that familiar steel rising up. I do. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Webb closed the Bible. Caleb, you may kiss your bride. That part neither of them had thought about. They stood there awkwardly. Two people who'd just legally bound themselves together, but barely knew each other's favorite color or how they took their coffee. Caleb leaned in, pressed a quick, chaste kiss to Lena's lips. It was brief, almost formal, but when he pulled back, something had shifted. They were married now. For real. Whatever happened next, they'd face it as husband and wife. Martha dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Hank clapped Caleb on the shoulder, hard enough to bruise. Webb made them sign the marriage certificate, his handwriting careful and precise, making it official in ink and law. I'll file this with the territorial office, Webb said. As of this moment, you're legally married. May you find peace in each other. Peace? Caleb almost laughed. They'd be lucky to find survival. They walked out of the church into the bright morning, and Caleb could feel eyes on them from every direction. Word would spread fast now. By nightfall, everyone in Grafton would know Caleb Rourke had married a stranger. We should get back, Lena said quietly. Caleb nodded. They climbed onto the wagon, and he was just reaching for the reins when a familiar voice called out, Well, well, congratulations. Caleb went still. He knew that voice. Turned to see Virgil Kane standing across the street, flanked by the same two men from before. Kane was smiling, that cold, dead smile that promised violence wrapped in politeness. Heard you got married, Kane continued, walking closer. That's real sweet. Real romantic. Caleb's hand moved toward his gun, but Lena touched his arm, stopping him. Don't. Not here. She was right. The street was full of people now, drawn by the commotion. A gunfight here would get innocent folks killed. Kane stopped a few feet from the wagon, looking up at them. Thought you said you hadn't seen anyone matching our description, Rourke. Didn't when you asked. But you knew she was coming. No law against marrying who I want. Kane's smile widened. No law against that at all. He paused, letting the moment stretch. But here's the thing. Marriage doesn't change what she owes. Doesn't change what she took from Mr. Creech. You understand that, right? She doesn't owe Creech anything, Caleb said evenly. Her father's debt died with him. That's not how Mr. Creech sees it. Don't much care how Creech sees it. The two younger men moved their hands closer to their guns. Kane raised a hand, casual, stopping them. "You're making a mistake, Rourke. Big one. Mr. Creech doesn't like being crossed. And he really doesn't like it when people hide things that belong to him." "She's not a thing, and she doesn't belong to anyone but herself." Caleb picked up the reins. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we've got a ranch to get back to." "I'll be seeing you soon," Kane said. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Caleb clicked his tongue and the horses moved forward, pulling the wagon past Kane and his men, past the watching townspeople, out onto the trail that led home. They didn't speak until Grafton was far behind them, just a smudge on the horizon. "He knows," Lena said finally. "He does. And he'll tell Creech. Probably already sent word." Lena twisted in her seat to look back, as if expecting riders to appear any moment. "What happens now?" "Now we get ready." Caleb kept his eyes forward, jaw tight. "Because Kane was right about one thing. Creech doesn't like being crossed, and when he comes, he won't come gentle." The wagon rolled on, carrying them back toward the ranch, back toward whatever Storm was building. Behind them, unseen, riders broke off from the edge of town and headed in a different direction, toward wherever Dalton Creech waited to hear news he wouldn't like. When they reached the ranch, the sun was high and hot, beating down without mercy. Caleb unhitched the horses while Lana went inside to change into something more practical. When she came back out, she was wearing work clothes, pants, boots, a shirt that had seen better days. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Caleb looked up from where he was checking the barn doors, making sure they'd hold if someone tried to force them. "You know how to shoot?" "My father taught me." "Good. Come here." He led her to the house, pulled out a rifle from beneath his bed and a revolver from a locked drawer, handed them both to her, watched how she held them, comfortable, familiar, like old friends. "The rifle's a Winchester, holds 15 rounds. The revolver's a Colt, 6 shots. He showed her the ammunition box. "We've got maybe 100 rounds total. That'll have to be enough." "Enough for what? An army?" "Maybe." Lena set the guns down carefully. "You really think Creech will come himself?" "Probably not. He'll send men. Enough to make sure the job gets done." Caleb moved to the window, looking out at his land. "We've got advantages. This is our ground. We know every rock, every gully, every place to take cover. They don't. And disadvantages? They've got numbers, experience, and they don't care who they have to kill to get what they want." The afternoon wore on, and they worked together to prepare the ranch for siege. Caleb reinforced the barn doors, positioned barrels and crates for cover, made sure water barrels were full in case of fire. Lena checked windows, noted angles of approach, thought like someone planning a defense because that's what they were doing. As the sun started dropping toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Caleb called a halt. "That's enough for today. We should eat, rest while we can." They went inside and Lena put together a meal from what little Caleb had: beans, bread, dried meat. Simple food, but it filled the empty spaces. They ate in silence at first, exhaustion settling in now that they'd stopped moving. "Tell me about the ranch," Lena said eventually. "How you built it." Caleb looked up, surprised. "Why?" "Because if I'm going to fight for it, I should know what I'm fighting for." "Fair point." Caleb set down his fork, thinking back to when he'd first arrived here 6 years ago, broke, angry, determined to never let anyone take from him again. "Wasn't much when I started. Just land nobody else wanted, too far from water, soil too stubborn, but that's why I could afford it." He paused. "First year, I lived in a tent while I built the barn. Figured the animals needed shelter more than I did. Second year, I started the house. 1 room at first, added on as I could afford timber." "No help?" "Some. Neighbors pitched in during barn raising, paid them back with labor when they needed it, but mostly just me, learning as I went, making mistakes, fixing them." "Sounds lonely." "It was," Caleb admitted, but lonely felt safer than trusting people who'd already proven they couldn't be trusted. Lena nodded, understanding in her eyes. "And now?" "Now I've got a wife I barely know, and outlaws coming to kill us both." He almost smiled. "Guess I'm terrible at learning lessons." She did smile at that, genuine warmth breaking through the tension. "Could be worse." "How?" Could be boring. Caleb laughed. Actually laughed. And it felt strange after days of coiled tension. Yeah, that's one thing this isn't. They finished eating and cleaned up together, falling into an easy rhythm neither had expected. When darkness fell full and complete, they sat by the fire, weapons close, listening to the night sounds. You think they'll come tonight? Lena asked. No, Cain'll want daylight, wants to see what he's up against. Tonight we're safe. And tomorrow? Tomorrow we find out if getting married was smart or just the last stupid thing we ever did. Lena pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. For what it's worth, I don't think it was stupid. No? No. Desperate, maybe. Reckless, definitely. But not stupid. She looked at him across the firelight. You could have turned me away, Caleb. Could have let Cain take me and saved yourself a world of trouble. But you didn't. Couldn't? Why not? He was quiet for a long time, staring into the flames, trying to find words for something he didn't fully understand himself. Finally. Because I remember what it feels like when nobody stands for you. When the world decides you don't matter, and there's not a single person willing to say otherwise. I swore if I ever had the chance to be the person I needed back then, I would be. Even if it cost you everything? Even then. Lena's eyes were bright, but she didn't cry, just nodded, like he'd confirmed something she already suspected. Thank you for being that person. Thank me when we're still alive next week. I'll thank you now anyway. They sat there as the fire burned down to coals, two people bound by circumstance and choice, waiting for morning and whatever it would bring. Outside, the land stretched dark and endless, and somewhere out there, men were coming with guns and bad intentions. But in here, by the dying fire, there was warmth and something close to hope. It wasn't much, but out here, it was enough. Lena fell asleep first, curled in the chair with the blanket wrapped around her. Caleb watched her for a moment, the stranger who was now his wife, and felt the weight of that responsibility settle on his shoulders. He'd made promises today, to her, to himself, to whatever watching force governed men's fates in this harsh land. He intended to keep them, or die trying. The night deepened, stars wheeling overhead in their endless dance, and Caleb sat vigil, rifle across his knees, waiting for the dawn and whatever hell it brought with it. Dawn came with the sound of horses. Caleb was awake before the first hoof hit dirt, rifle in hand, moving to the window in 3 silent steps. Lena stirred in the chair, eyes snapping open with the instant alertness of someone who'd learned to sleep light or not at all. How many? She whispered. Caleb counted silhouettes against the gray pre-dawn light. 6, maybe 7. Cain? Front and center. She was beside him now, revolver drawn, peering through the gap in the shutters. The riders had stopped just outside rifle range, sitting their horses in a loose line, waiting. Not attacking yet. That was almost worse. The waiting, the knowing it was coming, but not when. Cain sat his horse like a man with all the time in the world. Behind him, Caleb recognized the 2 younger guns from town, plus 4 more he'd never seen. Hard men, all of them. The kind who'd kill you for your boots and not lose sleep. What do you think they're waiting for? Lena's voice was steady, but her knuckles were white on the gun. Trying to rattle us. Let the fear build. Caleb checked his rifle's load for the 3rd time. We're waiting for orders. Could be Creech himself is out there somewhere, watching. Creech doesn't get his hands dirty. He pays men like Cain to do it for him. Then they're waiting for something else. Minutes dragged by, tension thick as smoke. The sun climbed higher, burning off the last of the dawn chill, and still the riders didn't move. Just sat there, a silent promise of violence held back by nothing but Cain's word. Finally, Cain nudged his horse forward, alone, hands visible, away from his weapons. He stopped 30 yards out. Rourke! His voice carried clear in the morning air. Let's talk. Caleb glanced at Lena. She shook her head. It's a trick. Probably, but we need to know what he wants. We already know what he wants, me. Then let's hear him say it. Caleb moved to the door, rifle held loose but ready. Stay inside. If shooting starts, get to the back room and don't come out till I call you. Like hell. You go out there. I'm covering you. He started to argue, saw the look on her face, and saved his breath. This woman had spent weeks running from men who wanted her dead. She wasn't about to hide in a back room while her husband faced them alone. Husband. The word still felt strange even after yesterday. Caleb stepped out onto the porch, keeping the rifle barrel pointed down but not far from ready. Behind him, he heard Lena take position at the window, covering his back. Kane smiled, that dead reptile smile. There's the man of the hour. Congratulations again on your marriage. Real touching ceremony, I heard. State your business, Kane. Business, right. Kane shifted in his saddle, leather creaking. See, that's exactly what this is. Business. Mr. Creech has a problem, and your new wife is part of that problem. Nothing personal. Everything's personal when you're talking about killing someone. Who said anything about killing? Kane spread his hands, all innocence. We just want what belongs to Mr. Creech. The documents, the evidence. Your wife hands that over, we ride away peaceful. Everybody lives. She doesn't have them. Already gave them to a federal marshal. Kane's smile slipped just slightly. Now see, that's unfortunate, because Mr. Creech was really hoping we could handle this quiet-like. But if those documents are already in federal hands, well, that changes things. Means your boss is going to hang? Means we need to make sure those documents don't make it to trial. And the best way to do that, Kane's eyes shifted to the house, to where he knew Lena was watching, is to make sure the witness who authenticated them isn't around to testify. There it was. The truth laid bare. They'd come to kill Lena, and marriage or no marriage, Kane meant to finish the job. She's under my protection now, Caleb said. Legal and binding. You touch her. You're not just crossing me, you're crossing the law. Kane laughed, genuine amusement. The law? Out here? Rourke, the nearest law is 30 miles away, and even if they came running, which they won't, we'd be long gone before they arrived. You're a smart man. You know how this works. You know who really runs things in this territory. Creech runs things till he doesn't. Men like him, they always fall eventually. Maybe, but not today. Kane's hand moved slightly, just a few inches, but closer to his gun. Here's how this goes. You give us the woman, we make it quick and clean. You don't, and we burn this place to the ground with both of you inside. Either way, she doesn't leave this ranch alive. But one way, you get to walk away. Build again somewhere else. Live to see tomorrow. The other riders had moved up now, forming a loose semicircle, hands resting on weapons. 7 against 2. Not impossible odds, but bad enough. What's your answer, Rourke? Caleb felt the weight of the moment, the choice that would define everything that came after. He could hand Lena over, save himself, live to regret it for whatever years remained. Or he could make a stand here, now, for something more than survival. He thought about his ranch in Colorado, how he'd walked away when powerful men told him to, how that shame had followed him for 6 years, a weight he carried every day. How he'd sworn never to run again, never to let someone take what was his without a fight. And Lena was his now. Not property, never that. But his responsibility, his choice, his wife, in the eyes of law and whatever else mattered. He'd made vows yesterday, made promises. Time to find out if those words meant anything. My answer, Caleb said slowly, clearly, is go to hell. For a second, nobody moved. Then Kane's smile vanished completely, replaced by cold calculation. Wrong choice, Rourke. Kane's hand dropped to his gun. Caleb's rifle came up fast, instinct and practice making his draw smooth despite the years. The Winchester's report cracked across the morning, loud as thunder, and Kane's horse screamed and reared. The shot had missed Kane by inches, deliberate, a warning, not a killing blow. But the other riders weren't waiting for warnings. Guns cleared leather, and suddenly the air was full of lead and smoke. Caleb threw himself sideways, rolling behind a water trough, as bullets chewed into the porch where he'd been standing. Wood splintered, glass shattered, and from inside the house came the sharp crack-crack of Lena's revolver answering back. He came up firing, working the Winchester's lever, putting rounds downrange fast as he could aim. One rider went down, clutching his shoulder. Another's horse bolted, carrying its rider out of the fight. The rest scattered, seeking cover behind the barn, the corral fence. anywhere that offered protection. A bullet punched through the trough above Caleb's head, spraying him with water. He rolled again, came up in a different spot, fired twice more. The rifle clicked empty. He dropped behind cover, fingers moving automatic through the reload, thumbing cartridges from his belt into the loading gate. "Caleb!" Lena's voice from inside. "They're circling around back!" He risked a look. 2 riders had broken off, swinging wide to flank the house. Smart. Kane was learning the battlefield, adapting. This wasn't some simple execution anymore. It was a real fight. Caleb sprinted for the house, legs pumping, expecting every second to feel a bullet slam into his back. He crashed through the door, rolled, came up beside Lena at the window. "Back door's barred," he asked between breaths. "First thing I did." "Windows?" "Shuttered on the north and east sides. West side's exposed." He moved to the west window, saw the 2 riders approaching, using the barn as cover. They'd reach the house in seconds, maybe try to set it on fire, smoke them out. "Here," he handed Lena the rifle. "You know how to use this?" "Point and shoot?" "Close enough. Keep them pinned down out front. I'll handle the flankers." She took the Winchester, moved to the front window, and started firing, measured shots, not wasting ammunition, but keeping Kane and his men from advancing. The woman could shoot. Her father had taught her well. Caleb grabbed his revolver, checked the cylinder. 6 rounds. Would have to be enough. He moved to the back of the house, to the small window that looked out on the side yard. The riders were close now, dismounted, moving low and fast. One carried a torch. There it was. The plan. Burn them out, shoot them as they ran from the flames. Caleb waited, patient as a snake, letting them come closer. 30 yards, 20, 15. He smashed out the window glass with his gun barrel and fired 3 times, fast as lightning. The man with the torch went down hard, the burning brand falling from his hand into the dirt. The second rider dove for cover, returning fire, bullets hammering the wall beside Caleb's head. Caleb ducked back, counted to 3, popped up in a different spot, and fired twice more. Heard a scream, cut short. When he looked again, both riders were down, one not moving, the other crawling for his horse. From the front room, Lena's rifle cracked steady and sure. Caleb reloaded and moved back to support her. The scene outside had changed. 2 riders were down for good. 3 others had pulled back, taking cover where they could. Kane sat his horse behind the barn, barely visible, directing his men with hand signals. "How many did you get?" Caleb asked. "1 down, 2 wounded. You?" "2 down out back." "That's 4 total, 3 wounded. Leaves 3 still fighting." Caleb did the math. They'd cut the odds from 7-2 to 3-2. Better, but still not great. And they were trapped inside the house while Kane's men had the whole ranch to maneuver in. "We can't stay here," Lena said, echoing his thoughts. "They'll wait us out, pick us off when we run low on ammunition or water. Or they'll fire the house after all." "So what do we do?" Caleb thought fast, weighing options. They needed to change the game, take the initiative back. Sitting here waiting to die wasn't a strategy. It was surrender in slow motion. "How much ammunition you got left?" Lena checked. "Maybe 20 rounds for the rifle, 10 for the revolver." "I've got about the same." He looked out at the barn at the layout of his own ranch, seeing it fresh through tactical eyes. "The barn. If we can make it there, we've got better cover, better angles, and there's a loft, high ground. That's 40 yards of open ground. 30 if we go out the back door. Still suicide. You got a better idea?" She was quiet, then shook her head. "No, but I don't love this one." "Welcome to marriage. It's all terrible choices and hoping you pick the least terrible one." That got a short, sharp laugh from her. "When do we go?" "Now, while they're still reorganizing." He moved to the back door, started pulling away the furniture they'd barricaded it with. "I'll go first, draw their fire. You count to 5 and follow. Don't stop, don't look back, just run." "Caleb." 5 seconds, Lena. That's all I need." He could see her wanting to argue, wanting to find a safer way, but there wasn't one, and they both knew it. She nodded, jaw set, ready. Caleb yanked open the door and ran. The morning sun hit him like a hammer, bright and hot, making him squint after the house's dimness. His boots pounded dirt, legs pumping, rifle held across his chest. Behind him he heard shouts, then gunfire. Bullets kicked up dust around his feet. One tugged at his sleeve, close enough to feel the heat. He zigged left, zagged right, making himself a harder target, every second feeling like an hour. The barn loomed closer. 20 yards. 15. A bullet punched into the ground inches from his boot. Another whined past his ear. And then he was there, diving through the barn door, rolling in the hay and dirt, coming up with the rifle aimed back the way he'd come. Lena burst from the house, running flat out, hair streaming behind her. Caleb laid down covering fire, working the Winchester's lever, sending rounds toward Kane's position. The riders ducked, returned fire, but their aim was off, rushed. Lena was halfway across when her foot caught a rut and she stumbled, went down hard. Caleb's heart stopped. She was exposed, vulnerable, a perfect target. Kane rose from behind the barn's corner, pistol leveled, taking his time for the shot that would end it. Caleb fired, missed, worked the lever, fired again. This one caught Kane in the leg, spinning him around, his shot going wild. Kane went down cursing, and his men moved to cover him, giving Lena the second she needed. She scrambled up, limping now but still moving, and made it to the barn. Caleb pulled her inside, slammed the door shut. "You hit?" "Twisted my ankle. I'm fine." She wasn't fine. Her face was pale, breathing ragged, but she could still stand, still fight. That was enough. They moved deeper into the barn, climbing the ladder to the loft. From up here, they had a view of the whole ranch, the house, the corral, the approach from the trail. Better position, better angles, just like Caleb had hoped. But they were also trapped, cornered. If Kane's men rushed the barn in force, there'd be nowhere left to run. "How bad's Kane hurt?" Lena asked, settling into position by the loft's opening. "Leg wound. He'll live, but he's out of the fight for now. So we're down to his 2 remaining guns, unless he's got more waiting somewhere." They watched the yard, weapons ready, waiting for the next move. Minutes crawled by. The sun climbed higher, turning the loft into an oven. Sweat ran down Caleb's back, stinging in the cuts and scrapes he'd collected. Then movement. One of Kane's men, the youngest, couldn't be more than 20, broke from cover, sprinting toward the barn's side door. Lena fired. The shot went wide. She worked the lever, fired again. This one caught the kid in the shoulder, spinning him around but not dropping him. He made it to the barn wall, out of their line of sight. "He's trying to get inside," Caleb said. "There's 3 other doors. Can we cover them all?" "No." They heard it then, the sound of wood splintering, a door being forced. The kid had gotten inside, was somewhere below them in the barn's maze of stalls and equipment. Caleb looked at Lena. "Stay here. Keep eyes on the yard. Anyone else tries to enter, you shoot them." "Where are you going?" "Downstairs. Can't let him get positioned below us." "Caleb, that's—" "I know, but it's the only move we've got." He started down the ladder before she could argue further, moving quiet despite his size, rifle held ready. The barn's lower level was dim after the loft's brightness, full of shadows and places to hide. Caleb moved between the stalls, listening. Somewhere the kid was doing the same, both of them hunting each other in the dark. A board creaked to Caleb's left. He spun, rifle up, but saw nothing. Could have been wind, could have been a rat, could have been a scared kid with a gun waiting to blow his head off. He kept moving, checking corners, staying low. The barn felt bigger than it had when he'd built it, full of blind spots and ambush points. Then he saw him, the kid, crouched behind a feed bin, reloading with shaking hands. Blood soaked his shoulder where Lena's bullet had tagged him, and his face was white with pain and fear. Their eyes met. For a second, neither moved, just 2 men with guns, deciding whether to kill each other. "Don't," Caleb said quietly. "You're hurt. Fight's over for you. Walk away." "Can't," the kid's voice cracked. "Kane'll kill me if I run." "He'll get you killed if you stay." "Don't have a choice." "Everyone's got a choice." The kid's gun came up. Caleb fired first, pure reflex, no thought. The Winchester's report was deafening in the enclosed space, echoing off walls and beams. The kid went down hard, gun clattering away, clutching his chest. Caleb moved closer, kicked the gun aside, looked down at the dying boy. Couldn't have been more than 19, 20 at most. Probably thought riding with Kane was adventure, easy money, a chance to make a name. Now he was bleeding out in a stranger's barn, dying for a man who'd forget his name by sunset. "I'm sorry," Caleb said, and meant it. The kid tried to say something, but blood filled his mouth. His eyes went wide, scared, looking for something that wasn't there. Then he was gone, just meat and emptiness. Caleb stood there, rifle barrel still smoking, feeling the weight of what he'd done. He'd killed before, during the war, and once after when a claim jumper had drawn on him first. But it never got easier. Never stopped feeling like you'd torn something from the world that couldn't be replaced. "Caleb!" Lena's voice from above, urgent. "They're coming!" He shook off the moment, moved fast back to the ladder. When he reached the loft, Lena pointed to the yard. Kane had rallied his last two men. They were advancing on the barn together, moving in a coordinated rush, laying down suppressing fire that kept Caleb and Lena's heads down. "How many rounds you got left?" Caleb asked. 6, maybe 7. "I've got 4. 10, 11 rounds total against 3 determined men. The math wasn't good. The barn door crashed open below, boots on wood moving fast. They were inside. Caleb looked at Lena, saw his own fear reflected in her eyes. They'd fought hard, fought smart, but sometimes hard and smart wasn't enough. Sometimes you just ran out of luck and ammunition at the same time. "Whatever happens," he said, "I don't regret it, any of it. Even marrying a stranger? Especially that." She smiled, fierce and beautiful despite everything. "Good. Neither do I." Then the shooting started again, and there was no more time for words. Kane's men came up both sides of the loft ladder, firing as they climbed. Caleb and Lena returned fire, trying to make every shot count. One of the men fell back, hit, but the other made it to the loft level. Caleb's rifle clicked empty. He dropped it, drew his revolver, fired twice. Both shots hit center mass, dropping the gunman hard. But his momentum carried him forward, and he crashed into Caleb, both of them going down in a tangle of limbs. Lena screamed his name. Caleb fought to get the dead weight off him, knowing every second he was down was a second they were vulnerable. Boots on the ladder. The last man coming up, and Lena was between him and Caleb, exposed. She fired her last 2 rounds. Both missed. The hammer fell on an empty chamber. The gunman stepped into the loft, pistol raised, aimed directly at Lena's chest. And that's when the voice rang out across the ranch, loud and commanding. "Federal Marshal, everyone put down your weapons." The gunman froze. Caleb shoved the dead man off him, scrambled for his revolver. Lena stood there, empty gun still raised, not quite believing what she'd heard. Kane's man looked torn, caught between orders and survival. Then he made his choice, started to swing his gun toward where the voice had come from. 2 shots rang out in quick succession. The gunman jerked, dropped his pistol, collapsed. Caleb moved to the loft opening, looked down. A man stood in the barn entrance, badge glinting on his vest, smoking revolver in his hand. He was tall, graying, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent a lifetime enforcing law in lawless places. Behind him, 3 more men in badges, rifles ready. "Caleb Rourke?" the marshal called up. "That's me." "Marshal Henry Blackwood. Got word from Prescott there might be trouble out this way. Looks like we timed it about right." Caleb helped Lena to her feet. They stood there, covered in blood and dirt and cordite residue, barely believing they were still alive. "Kane?" Caleb asked. "In custody. Him and the 1 man still breathing. The rest won't be standing trial." Blackwood's expression was grim. "This the witness? Lena Varela?" "Lena Rourke now," Caleb said. "We got married yesterday." Blackwood's eyebrows went up. "That's so. Well, congratulations. Though I suspect there's a story there. A long one." "I've got time." The marshal gestured to his men. "Secure the area. Get the wounded patched up. And someone find me rope. We're taking prisoners back to face justice." As the marshals moved to follow orders, Caleb and Lena climbed down from the loft. Every muscle ached, exhaustion hitting now that the adrenaline was fading. They'd survived. Against all odds, against Kane and his guns, they'd made it through. Lena's legs gave out when she reached the ground. Caleb caught her, held her up. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." "We did," he agreed. But even as relief flooded through him, Caleb knew this wasn't over. Kane was in custody, but Dalton Creech was still out there, still powerful, still dangerous. One battle won didn't mean the war was finished. Still, for now, in this moment, they were alive. That counted for something. It counted for everything. Marshal Blackwood's men worked through the afternoon clearing the dead, tending the wounded, and securing Kane and his surviving gunmen with enough rope to rig a ship. Caleb watched it all from the porch, Lena beside him, both of them too wrung out to do much more than exist. The ranch looked like a battlefield, bullet holes stitched across the barn, the house, even the water trough. Blood stained the dirt in dark patches that would take weeks of rain to wash away. 4 bodies lay in a row near the corral, covered with canvas tarps that stirred in the wind. "Hell of a mess," Blackwood said, climbing the porch steps. He carried 3 tin cups and a bottle of whiskey that had seen better days. "Figured you could use this." He poured 3 generous measures and handed them out. The whiskey burned going down, harsh and welcome. Caleb felt it hit his empty stomach, spreading warmth that had nothing to do with the afternoon heat. "So," Blackwood said, settling onto the porch rail, "you want to tell me how a rancher I've never heard of ends up married to the witness in the biggest corruption case in territorial history, with 7 of Dalton Creech's hired guns dead on his property?" Caleb looked at Lena. She nodded slightly, giving permission. He told it straight, how Lena had stumbled onto his ranch half dead, how Kane had come looking, how they'd decided marriage was the only legal protection that might work. He left out the parts about fear and desperation, but Blackwood was smart enough to read between the lines. When Caleb finished, the marshal was quiet for a long moment, staring into his whiskey like it held answers. "That's either the bravest thing I've heard or the dumbest," Blackwood said finally. "Haven't decided which." "Could be both," Lena offered. "Could be." Blackwood drained his cup. "But it worked. Marriage makes you Caleb's legal kin, which means any claim Creech had on you just got a lot more complicated. Can't just make you disappear without raising questions about why a married woman vanished from her own ranch." Kane didn't seem too worried about questions. "Kane's a blunt instrument. Creech is smarter." Blackwood refilled his cup. "He'll pull back now. Regroup. Find another angle. Man like him doesn't give up just because one plan failed." "So we're still in danger," Caleb said. "Oh, absolutely. But the nature of the danger's changed. Before, you were a loose end. Now you're a complication. Creech doesn't like complications. They draw attention, make people ask questions. And with the evidence Lena provided already in federal hands, he's got bigger problems than one witness." Lena leaned forward. "The papers I gave Marshal Davies and Prescott, they're enough to prosecute?" "If Davies is honest, yes. If he gets them to the territorial court before Creech can interfere, definitely." Blackwood paused. "Big ifs, though. Creech owns a lot of people, judges, sheriffs, even some federal appointees. We're talking about a man who spent 20 years building a network of corruption. Taking him down won't be quick or easy." "But it can be done?" "It can be done. With you alive to testify, with the documents authenticated, with enough honest lawmen pushing the case forward, yeah, we can put him away." Blackwood met her eyes. "Question is whether you're willing to see it through. Because testifying means putting yourself in the spotlight, making yourself a target all over again. Marriage or no marriage, if Creech gets desperate enough, he'll try to finish what Kane started." Lena's hand found Caleb's, gripped tight. "I'm willing. My father died trying to stop Creech. I'm not letting that be for nothing. Even if it costs you everything? I already lost everything. This is about making sure he pays for it." Blackwood nodded, something like approval in his eyes. He turned to Caleb. "And you? You signed up for protecting a witness, but that was before bullets started flying. Still want in on this fight?" Caleb thought about the easy answer, the one where he said he'd done enough, that the marshals could take it from here, that he and Lena could disappear somewhere Creech would never find them. But that was running, and he'd promised himself years ago he was done running. "I'm in," he said simply. "Good." Blackwood stood, joints cracking. "Then here's what happens next. I take Kane and his man back to Prescott for trial. Their testimony might give us leverage against Creech, assuming we can flip one of them. Meanwhile, you two stay here. Keep your heads down. Don't do anything to attract attention." "For how long?" "As long as it takes to build the case. Could be weeks, could be months." And if Creech sends more men? Lena asked. He won't. Not right away. Losing 7 guns in one morning is expensive, even for him. He'll wait, watch, figure out his next move. That gives us time. Caleb wasn't so sure. Men like Creech didn't get where they were by being patient, but arguing wouldn't change anything. What about the bodies? He asked. We'll take them, give them proper burial in town, notify next of kin if they have any. Blackwood's expression hardened. And before anyone asks, this was a legitimate act of self-defense. 7 armed men attacked your ranch with intent to kill. You were within your rights to defend your home and your wife. There won't be charges. Relief flooded through Caleb. He hadn't realized how much he'd been worrying about that until the marshal said it out loud. They talked for another hour, working through details and logistics. Blackwood would leave 2 of his deputies stationed in Grafton, keeping watch for any Creech activity. He'd send word when the trial date was set, when Lena would need to travel to the territorial capital to testify. As the sun started its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, the marshals prepared to leave. Kane was loaded onto a wagon, leg bandaged, wrists and ankles bound. He glared at Caleb with pure hatred as they hauled him past. This isn't over, Rourke, Kane spat. Creech will make sure you pay for this. Maybe, Caleb said evenly, but you won't be around to see it. Kane's face twisted with rage, but the marshals dragged him onward, loading him into the wagon alongside his wounded companion. Within minutes, they were ready to depart. Blackwood shook Caleb's hand, then Lena's. Stay alert, trust your instincts, and if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you ride to town and find my deputies. Understood? They both nodded. The marshal climbed onto his horse, tipped his hat, and led his small convoy down the trail. Caleb and Lena stood on the porch, watching until the dust settled and they were alone again. The quiet that followed felt strange after all the violence and chaos. Just wind in the grass, a hawk crying somewhere overhead, the normal sounds of the ranch asserting themselves again. We should clean up, Lena said finally, looking at the bloodstains, the bullet holes, the evidence of how close they'd come to dying. Tomorrow, Caleb said. Today, we just breathe. They went inside as dusk gathered. The house was a wreck, broken glass, splintered wood, furniture overturned, but it was standing, and so were they. That felt like miracle enough. Caleb built a fire while Lena found food that hadn't been destroyed in the fight. They ate in silence, too exhausted for conversation, then sat by the flames as darkness claimed the land outside. Thank you, Lena said quietly. For what? For not giving me up. When Kane offered you a way out, you could have taken it. Most men would have. I'm not most men? No, she agreed. You're not. She leaned against him, head resting on his shoulder, and Caleb put his arm around her without thinking about it. It felt natural, right? Like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. What happens now? Lena asked. After the trial, after Creech is dealt with, what do we do? Caleb stared into the fire, thinking about that. They'd gotten married out of desperation, a legal maneuver to save her life. But something had shifted during the fight, during the moments when they'd stood together against impossible odds. What had started as strategy had become something else, something real. I guess that depends, he said carefully. On what you want. What I want is complicated. Most things worth having are. Lena pulled back to look at him, firelight dancing in her dark eyes. I want Creech to pay for what he did to my father. I want the ranch back, the land that's rightfully mine. I want justice and closure and all those things that sound good but don't bring anyone back from the dead. And after that? She was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. I spent so long running, I forgot what it's like to think past tomorrow. But being here, fighting beside you, it reminded me there's more to life than just surviving. That maybe I could build something again. Have a home, not just a place to hide. You could stay, Caleb said. Here, with me. Not because you have to, but because you want to. As your wife? For real? For real. No tricks, no legal maneuvering, just 2 people choosing to be together. Lena searched his face, looking for doubt or deception. She wouldn't find either. Caleb had surprised himself with the offer, but once spoken, He knew it was what he wanted. This woman had brought chaos and danger to his quiet life, and somehow that had woken something in him he'd thought long dead. The ability to care about someone other than himself. "I'd like that," Lena said softly. "I'd like that a lot." They kissed then, and it wasn't like the awkward peck after their wedding ceremony. This was real, hungry, two people who'd faced death together and come through the other side wanting to prove they were still alive. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Caleb laughed. "What?" Lena asked. "Just thinking. Most couples date before getting married. We're doing this backwards. Nothing about this has been normal." "True enough." They stayed by the fire until it burned down to embers, talking about small things and large ones, learning each other in the quiet hours. Lena told him about her childhood, about the mother who died when she was 10, about learning to be strong because strength was the only currency that mattered. Caleb talked about the war, about Colorado, about the loneliness of the past 6 years, and how he'd convinced himself he preferred it that way. Somewhere around midnight, they moved to the bedroom. Caleb started to take the floor, offering Lena the bed like he had every night since she'd arrived. But she pulled him back, kept him close, and they fell asleep tangled together, exhausted and safe in each other's presence. The next morning brought reality crashing back. There was a ranch to repair, damage to assess, normalcy to rebuild from chaos. They worked side by side, boarding up broken windows, patching bullet holes, cleaning blood from wood that would probably never quite come clean. Neighbors started arriving around noon. Word had spread about the gunfight, the marshals, the bodies. Martha Donnelly showed up with food and genuine concern. Hank brought lumber and nails. Others came with offers of help, questions, and barely concealed curiosity about the woman Caleb had married. Lena handled it all with grace Caleb hadn't expected. She thanked them for their help, deflected intrusive questions with polite firmness, and worked alongside everyone without complaint. By sunset, the ranch looked almost normal again, and the neighbors departed with promises to check in regularly. "That wasn't so bad," Lena said as the last wagon rolled away. "They like you. They're curious about me. There's a difference. Martha likes you, I could tell. Martha's sweet. The others are reserving judgment." Can't blame them. Strange woman appears out of nowhere, married to a man who keeps to himself. Then 7 men die on his property. That's a lot to process. Lena smiled tiredly. "When you put it that way, I'm surprised they helped at all." The days that followed settled into a rhythm. Caleb taught Lena the routines of the ranch, how to doctor sick cattle, mend fence the right way, read weather patterns in the clouds. She absorbed it all quickly, her experience on her father's ranch serving her well. In the evenings, they'd sit on the porch, watching the land darken, talking about everything and nothing. Slowly, carefully, they were building something together. Not just a marriage of convenience, but a real partnership. 2 weeks after the gunfight, a rider appeared on the horizon. Caleb's hand went to his gun automatically, but Lena put a hand on his arm. "It's one of Blackwood's deputies," she said, squinting into the distance. "I recognized the horse." She was right. The deputy rode up, dusty and tired, carrying a sealed envelope. "Message from Marshal Blackwood," he said, handing it over. "Said it was urgent." Caleb tore open the envelope, read quickly, then read again slower to make sure he understood. "What is it?" Lena asked. "Trial date's been set. 3 weeks from now in the territorial capital. You're required to appear." "That's fast." "Blackwood's pushing hard, trying to get it done before Creech can mount a defense." Caleb kept reading. "Says Kane flipped, gave testimony about Creech's whole operation, the fraud, the violence, everything. With Kane's testimony and your documents, they've got enough to hang Creech twice over. If we make it to trial." "If we make it to trial," Caleb agreed. The deputy shifted in his saddle. "Marshal wants you both escorted. He'll send a full detail to bring you to the capital safe. But until then, his orders are to stay put, stay vigilant." "We can do that," Caleb said. The deputy nodded, tipped his hat, and rode off. Caleb and Lena watched him go, both thinking the same thing. 3 weeks. They had 3 weeks before Lena would have to stand in front of a court and testify against one of the most powerful men in the territory. 3 weeks before Creech would make his final, desperate move to stop her. "He'll come," Lena said quietly. "Creech himself, or someone he trusts absolutely. He can't risk me testifying. I know. We should run. Take what we can carry and disappear. Change our names, start over somewhere he'll never find us. Caleb looked at her. Is that what you want? No, she admitted. But it's the smart play. When have we ever made the smart play? That got a laugh from her, short and sharp. Fair point. They went inside and Caleb pulled out every weapon he owned, rifles, pistols, even an old cavalry saber from the war. He cleaned and loaded each one, set them in strategic positions around the house and barn. If Creech came, they'd be ready. The next 3 weeks crawled by with agonizing slowness. Every distant dust cloud was a threat. Every unexpected sound at night brought them both awake with weapons drawn. They slept in shifts, ate fast, and never let their guard down. But nothing happened. No riders appeared. No threats materialized. The ranch stayed quiet, almost peaceful, and that worried Caleb more than an outright attack would have. Creech was planning something. Had to be. The question was what? 2 days before they were scheduled to leave for the capital, Caleb rode into town for supplies. He'd argued with Lena about going, didn't want to leave her alone, but they needed ammunition, food, things they couldn't do without. He'd be quick, in and out, back before dark. Grafton was busier than usual, people moving with purpose through the streets. Caleb tied his horse outside the general store and went inside. Hank was behind the counter, face grave. Heard you're heading to the capital, Hank said. Word travels fast. Always does. Hank lowered his voice. Be careful, Caleb. There's talk. People saying Creech has offered a reward for anyone who can stop your wife from testifying. Big money. The kind that makes good men think bad thoughts. Caleb's jaw tightened. How big? $5,000. Dead or alive, but preferably dead. That was a fortune out here, more than most men made in 5 years. With that kind of money on the table, they couldn't trust anyone. Thanks for the warning. Just watch your back, and hers. Hank started gathering supplies. You're good people. This territory needs more of that, not less. Caleb paid for his supplies, loaded them onto his horse, and was about to mount when he noticed a stranger watching from across the street. Tall man, well-dressed for these parts, with cold eyes and a professional stillness that marked him as dangerous. Their eyes met. The stranger smiled slightly, touched his hat brim, and walked into the saloon. Caleb's instincts screamed danger. That wasn't one of Creech's usual guns, too refined, too controlled. This was something else. Someone brought in specifically for this job, an assassin. Caleb rode back to the ranch faster than was smart, pushing his horse hard. He needed to warn Lena, needed to change their plans. If Creech had brought in a professional killer, their original strategy of waiting for the marshal's escort wouldn't work. The ranch came into view. Everything looked normal, too normal. No smoke from the chimney even though it was near dinner time. No sign of Lena in the yard or barn. Caleb dismounted on the run, drawing his revolver, every sense screaming warning. Lena! No answer. He burst through the door, gun up, and stopped dead. Lena sat at the table, hands folded, face pale. Standing behind her, gun pressed to the base of her skull, was the stranger from town. Mr. Rourke, the stranger said pleasantly. So good of you to join us. Please put down your weapon, or I'll paint your wall with your wife's brains. Caleb's mind raced through options, discarding each one as fast as it formed. The stranger had position, leverage, and a gun to Lena's head. Any move Caleb made would end with her dead. He set his revolver on the floor, raised his hand slowly. Smart, the stranger said. I appreciate a man who knows when he's beaten. Who are you? Name's Porter, Thomas Porter, though I suspect that means nothing to you. Porter's voice was cultured, Eastern educated, at odds with the violence his profession required. I'm what you might call a problem solver. Mr. Creech has a problem. I solve it. Simple business transaction. $5,000 worth of business. Porter smiled. You heard about that? Yes, Mr. Creech is quite motivated. Though between you and me, I'd have done this for half. I appreciate elegant work, and there's something elegant about eliminating a witness right before trial. Sends a message. Lena's eyes locked on Caleb's, desperate but not broken. She was waiting, watching for any opening. So was Caleb. You won't make it out of here alive, Caleb said. Marshall's got deputies in town. They'll hunt you down. Will they? I think not. Porter shifted slightly, gun never wavering from Lena's skull. See, I've planned this rather carefully. Your wife, tragic accident, gas leak perhaps, house fire. You tried to save her, died in the attempt. Very heroic, very sad. By the time anyone asks questions, I'll be 3 territories away with a new name and enough money to retire comfortably. Creech will betray you. Men like him always do. Perhaps. But that's a problem for another day. Porter's finger tightened on the trigger. Any last words, Mrs. Rourke? Yeah, Lena said, and drove her elbow backward into Porter's ribs. It wasn't much, couldn't be with the limited angle, but it was enough to shift his aim just slightly. The gun roared, deafening in the enclosed space, and the bullet meant for Lena's brain went wide, tearing through her shoulder instead. She screamed and dropped. Caleb dove for his revolver, fingers closing on the grip as Porter swung his gun around. 2 shots fired simultaneously. Caleb felt something punch his side, hot and violent, spinning him around. Porter staggered back, red bloom spreading across his chest. Both men stood there for a frozen second, bleeding, guns raised. Then Porter's knees buckled and he went down hard, gun clattering away. He tried to speak, coughed blood instead, and went still. Caleb dropped to his knees beside Lena. She was conscious, clutching her shoulder, blood seeping between her fingers. How bad? He asked, pressing his hand over hers, trying to stem the bleeding. Went through, didn't hit bone. Her voice was tight with pain, but steady. You? Grazed my ribs. I'll live. He pulled off his shirt, wadded it against her shoulder. We need to get you to town. Doc Henderson can patch you up proper. Porter? Caleb glanced at the body. Dead. Good. Lena tried to sit up, winced, fell back. Creech sent his best. That means he's desperate. Which makes him more dangerous, not less. Caleb helped her to her feet, supporting most of her weight. Come on, can you ride? Have to, don't I? They made it outside, moving slow. Caleb got Lena onto his horse, climbed up behind her, and turned toward town. Every step jarred her wound, making her gasp, but she didn't complain, just gritted her teeth and held on. The ride to Grafton took forever. By the time they reached Doc Henderson's place, Lena's face was gray with blood loss and pain. The doc, a grizzled man who'd patched up more gunshot wounds than he cared to count, took one look and started barking orders. Get her inside. Table. Now. Caleb carried her in, laid her on the examining table. Henderson cut away her shirt, exposing the wound, entry and exit both, clean holes but bleeding steady. You're right, it went through, Henderson said, probing gently while Lena bit down on a leather strap. Missed the bone, missed major vessels. You're lucky. Doesn't feel lucky, Lena managed around the strap. Never does. He looked at Caleb. You hurt? Just grazed. Let me see. Caleb lifted his arm, showing the bloody furrow across his ribs. Henderson grunted. Clean it, bandage it. You'll be sore for a week, but you'll live. He turned back to Lena. This'll hurt. Got any whiskey in you? Not enough. Henderson pulled out a bottle, made her drink half of it straight. Then he went to work, cleaning, stitching, bandaging, while Lena breathed through clenched teeth and Caleb held her hand tight enough to bruise. When it was done, Henderson stepped back, wiping blood from his hands. She'll need rest, clean bandages twice daily, and someone watching for infection. You can move her in a few days, but carefully. We've got a trial in 2 days, Caleb said. Then she's not going. Simple as that. She has to. She's the witness. Henderson's expression hardened. Son, I just pulled a bullet's path out of this woman's shoulder. She's lost blood, she's in pain, and riding 3 days to the territorial capital will tear those stitches open and probably kill her from infection. I don't care what trial you're talking about. She's not going anywhere. Caleb looked at Lena. She was pale, exhausted, but her eyes were clear and determined. I'm going, she said. Lena, this is what my father died for. This is what we fought for. I'm not letting Porter's bullet stop me any more than I let Kane's guns. She struggled to sit up. I'll rest today, tomorrow. Then we leave. I'll make it. You'll kill yourself trying. Maybe, but at least Creech will hang first. Henderson threw up his hands. Stubborn fool woman, fine. Do what you want. But when those stitches tear and you're bleeding out on the trail, don't say I didn't warn you. He stalked off, muttering about idiots and death wishes. Caleb helped Lena lie back down. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. The documents are enough. Kane's testimony is enough. They can convict Creech without you there. Can they? Or will some bought judge throw it all out because the key witness didn't show? Will Creech's lawyers claim the documents are fraudulent because I'm not there to authenticate them? She shook her head. No, I need to be there. Need to look Creech in the eye while they read the charges. Need him to know he didn't win. Caleb understood that. Understood the need for justice, to have a face, a voice, a living person standing up to say this is wrong, and here's proof. Understood it because he'd felt the same need when they took his ranch in Colorado, the desperate wish to stand before those men and make them see what they'd done. He'd never gotten that chance, but Lena would have hers. All right, he said, we go, but we do it smart. No main roads, no obvious routes. And we tell Marshal Blackwood what happened. Get his escort early, as much protection as he can spare. Agreed. One of Blackwood's deputies was in town, and Caleb found him at the boarding house, sent word immediately about Porter's attack. The deputy's face went grim as he listened. I'll wire the marshal tonight, get his orders, but I'm guessing he'll want to move up the escort, get you both to the Capitol under heavy guard. How soon can that happen? Tomorrow, if he pushes hard, day after at latest. Make it tomorrow. We're running out of time and luck. The deputy nodded and hurried off. Caleb returned to the doc's place, found Lena sleeping, her breathing shallow but steady. Henderson had moved her to a back room with a proper bed, and she looked small against the white sheets, vulnerable in a way she never allowed when awake. Caleb pulled up a chair and sat watch. His side ached where Porter's bullet had creased him, a constant reminder of how close they'd come. Another inch left and the shot would have punched through his lung. Another inch right and it would have torn open his gut. But they were alive, both of them. That was becoming a habit. He dozed in the chair as afternoon faded to evening, jerking awake at every sound, hand going to his gun each time. But nothing came except Henderson checking on Lena, bringing food Caleb couldn't taste, offering advice he barely heard. Sometime past midnight, Lena woke. Her eyes found him in the darkness, shadowed and alert. You should sleep, she said, voice rough. Can't. Porter's dead. Creech doesn't have time to send anyone else before the trial. You sure about that? She was quiet, then shook her head. No? Then I stay awake. Stubborn. You're one to talk. He moved his chair closer, took her uninjured hand. How's the pain? Manageable. Henderson gave me something, makes everything fuzzy around the edges. Good. Rest while you can. Tomorrow's going to be hard. Tomorrow, Lena repeated, like she was testing the word. We're really doing this. Going to the Capitol, facing Creech in court. Having second thoughts? No, just realizing it's real. For weeks this has been about surviving, about making it one more day. But now it's actually happening. The trial, the testimony, all of it. Caleb squeezed her hand. You'll do fine. Just tell the truth. That's all anyone can ask. What if it's not enough? What if Creech walks anyway? Then we deal with it. But at least we'll know we tried. At least your father's death meant something. Lena's eyes closed, tears leaking from the corners. Not from pain. This was something deeper, older grief finally finding its way out. I miss him, she whispered. Every day I miss him. And I hate that Creech took him from me. Hate that men like Creech can just destroy people and walk away like it doesn't matter. It matters. And tomorrow, we make sure everyone knows it matters. She cried quietly for a while, and Caleb sat with her, holding her hand, offering the only comfort he could, presence, solidarity, the knowledge that she wasn't alone in this fight. Eventually, she slept again, and Caleb kept his vigil through the long, dark hours until dawn broke gray and uncertain over Grafton. Marshal Blackwood arrived with 6 deputies at noon, riding hard from Prescott. He took one look at Lena, bandaged, pale, but upright and determined, and shook his head. You should be in bed. I should be testifying, Lena countered. Stubborn runs deep in this family, I see. Blackwood turned to Caleb. Porter was a professional, one of the best. The fact that you killed him is either remarkable luck or remarkable skill. Bit of both, and Lena's elbow to his ribs. Teamwork, I like it. Blackwood laid out the plan. They'd travel in a tight formation, 2 deputies ahead, 2 behind, Caleb and Lena in the middle with Blackwood and his second in command. They'd avoid main roads, camp rough, and assume everyone they met was a threat until proven otherwise. It's 3 days hard riding. Can you manage that? Lena nodded. I can manage. They left within the hour. Henderson had protested, predicted disaster, and ultimately given Lena enough laudanum to dull the worst of the pain without knocking her unconscious. She sat her horse stiff and careful, every movement calculated to avoid jarring her shoulder. Caleb rode beside her, close enough to catch her if she fell, watching for signs she was failing. But Lena was tougher than she looked. Mile after mile, she stayed upright, stayed focused, teeth clenched against pain that must have been considerable. The first day passed without incident. They made camp in a shallow canyon, posted guards in shifts, and ate cold food to avoid the attention a fire might draw. Lena slept fitful and pained, waking often with gasps that told Caleb her shoulder was worse than she'd admit. Second day brought harder terrain, rocky ground that made the horses work, elevation that turned breathing into labor. Lena's face went from pale to gray, but she never asked to stop, never complained, just kept riding, kept pushing, fueled by something stronger than physical strength. They camped that night in a stand of cottonwoods near a creek. Blackwood checked Lena's bandages, found them seeping red but not soaked through. You're holding up better than I expected, he admitted, but you need to rest tomorrow when we reach the capital. Give yourself time to heal before the trial starts. When does it start? Day after we arrive. Judge is pushing it through fast, trying to get a conviction before Creech can interfere further. Then I've got 1 day to heal. I'll manage. Blackwood shook his head but said nothing more. What could he say? They were all committed now, riding toward a confrontation that would either bring justice or get them killed. The third day dawned cold and clear. They were close now, maybe 10 hours to the territorial capital if they pushed steady. The tension in the group had ratcheted up, everyone expecting an ambush, a last desperate play by Creech to stop them. But the miles passed quiet. Too quiet, Caleb thought, like the land was holding its breath. They crested a rise around midday and saw it, the capital sprawling in the valley below, bigger than any town Caleb had seen in years. Streets laid out in a grid, buildings of stone and brick, the territorial courthouse rising at the center like a declaration of order imposed on chaos. There it is, Blackwood said. Once we're inside those walls, Creech can't touch you. Too many witnesses, too much law. We made it. They rode down into the valley, and Caleb felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. They'd done it. Against Kane's guns and Porter's bullets, and 3 days of hard travel, they'd gotten Lena to the trial alive. The capital's streets were busy with afternoon commerce, wagons, horses, people moving with purpose. Nobody paid particular attention to their group, just another set of travelers in a town that saw hundreds daily. Blackwood led them to a hotel near the courthouse, a solid building with guards posted at the entrance. We've got the whole 3rd floor secured. No one gets up there without my say-so. You'll be safe here. They got Lena inside and settled in a room that was clean and comfortable but felt like a cage after weeks on the ranch. She sank onto the bed with a groan, finally allowing herself to show the pain she'd been hiding. Doc's coming to check your wound, Blackwood said. Get some rest. Tomorrow we prep you for testimony. Day after you take the stand. When Blackwood left, Caleb helped Lena out of her travel-stained clothes and into a clean nightshirt the hotel had provided. The bandage on her shoulder was dark with old blood and seepage. We should change that, he said, after the doc sees it. I don't want to mess with Henderson's work. The territorial doctor arrived an hour later, a younger man than Henderson, but equally competent. He cut away the old bandage, examined the wound with careful fingers, and nodded approval. Healing well, considering. You rode 3 days with this? Didn't have much choice. Well, you've got choice now. Rest. No exertion. Keep it clean and dry. If you're lucky, it won't slow you down too much in court. He applied fresh bandages and left. Lena fell asleep almost immediately, exhaustion finally claiming what adrenaline had held at bay. Caleb sat by the window, watching the street below, thinking about tomorrow. This was it. The moment everything had been building toward. Lena would testify, would tell her story to a judge and jury. The documents would be entered as evidence. Kane's testimony would corroborate it all. And if the system worked, if justice actually meant something, Dalton Creech would be convicted and hanged for his crimes. But Caleb had learned the hard way that systems didn't always work, that powerful men found ways to escape justice, to buy their freedom, to make problems disappear. If Creech walked, what then? He pushed the thought away. Cross that bridge when they came to it. For now, Lena was alive, the trial was happening, and they'd done everything possible to see justice served. The rest was out of their hands. The next day passed in preparation. A lawyer, appointed by the territorial court to help prosecute, walked Lena through her testimony, asked the questions she'd face, prepared her for Creech's defense team and their tactics. She handled it well, voice steady, facts clear, never wavering even when they pressed her hard. Caleb watched from the corner, proud of this woman he'd married, this stranger who'd become the most important person in his life. That evening, Blackwood brought news. Trial starts at 9 tomorrow morning. Creech will be there in chains, along with Kane and the one surviving gunman from your ranch. The prosecutor's confident, says with your testimony and the evidence, conviction is all but certain. All but, Lena repeated. Not quite the same as certain. No, but it's as close as we get in this business. What happens if he's convicted? Sentencing same day if the judge allows it. Given the severity of the crimes, Creech will likely hang within the week. Lena nodded slowly. And if he's not convicted? Blackwood's expression went hard. Then we find another way. But let's worry about that if it happens. For now, get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Caleb and Lena lay in bed that night, neither sleeping, both staring at the ceiling in the darkness. You scared? Caleb asked. Terrified, Lena admitted. Not of testifying, but of failing. Of going through all this and having it not be enough. Won't be your fault if that happens. You've done everything right. Doesn't mean it'll matter. She turned to face him. Promise me something. Anything. If Creech walks, if the trial doesn't go our way, promise we'll leave. Take what we can carry and disappear. No heroics, no last stands, just survival. Caleb was quiet, torn between the promise she needed and the truth of what he'd do. I promise, he said finally, knowing it might be a lie, but unable to deny her this small comfort. She kissed him, soft and desperate, and they held each other through the long night, two people facing an uncertain dawn. Morning came too fast and too slow at once. Lena dressed in clothes Martha Donnelly had sent, simple but respectable, the kind of thing an honest rancher's daughter would wear. Her shoulder was stiff, movement limited, but she could manage. They walked to the courthouse under heavy escort, Blackwood's deputies forming a wall around them. The building was imposing up close, all stone and authority, designed to make people feel small before the weight of law. Inside, the courtroom was already filling, spectators, journalists, lawyers, all come to see the trial of Dalton Creech. The man himself sat at the defense table, flanked by two expensive lawyers in Eastern suits. He looked older than Caleb expected, gray-haired and distinguished, the kind of man who'd convince you to trust him right up until he destroyed you. Creech's eyes found Lena as she entered, and something cold and calculating passed between them. No rage, no fear, just assessment, like she was a problem he was still working on how to solve. The judge entered, a stern woman in her 60s named Patterson, known for being unbuyable and merciless. That was good. They needed unbuyable today. The trial began with opening statements. The prosecutor laid out the case methodically. Fraud, extortion, murder by proxy. A 20-year pattern of corruption that had destroyed dozens of families and enriched one man beyond measure. Creech's lawyers countered with character witnesses, claims of misunderstanding, suggestions that this was all a vendetta by a bitter daughter who couldn't accept her father's legitimate business failures. Then came the evidence. Documents entered into record, each one authenticated, each one damning, financial records showing the fraudulent loans, the rigged foreclosures, the payoffs to officials. Letters in Creech's own hand ordering violence against those who resisted. Kane testified next, shaky but clear, describing years of working for Creech, of hurting and killing on his orders. The defense tried to paint him as a liar seeking a reduced sentence, but Kane's details were too specific, too consistent with the documentary evidence. Then it was Lena's turn. She walked to the stand, right hand raised, swore to tell the truth, sat down carefully, favoring her injured shoulder, and met the prosecutor's eyes. Please state your name for the record. Lena Varela Rourke. And you're here to testify regarding your father, Miguel Varela, and his dealings with the defendant Dalton Creech? Yes. The prosecutor walked her through it, her father's ranch, the drought that led to the loan, Creech's terms and how they'd been impossible from the start, how the documents had been altered after signing, interest rates changed, payment schedules shifted, how when her father discovered the fraud and tried to fight it, Creech had used every tool at his disposal to break him. Lena's voice never wavered. She spoke clearly, precisely, backing up every claim with dates and facts. When the prosecutor showed her the documents, she identified her father's signature, pointed out the alterations, explained how she knew they were fraudulent. Then came cross-examination. Creech's lead attorney was a weasel of a man named Sutton, all smiles and insinuation. He tried to suggest Lena was an unreliable witness, grief-stricken and looking for someone to blame. He implied the documents might have been altered by her, not Creech. He questioned her timeline, her memory, her motives. But Lena held firm. She answered every question with the same steady certainty, never rising to the bait, never letting Sutton rattle her. When he tried to suggest her marriage to Caleb was part of some scheme to garner sympathy, she looked him dead in the eye. I married Caleb Rourke because Creech's men were hunting me, trying to kill me to stop me from testifying. Marriage was legal protection, but it became something more. It became a partnership built on standing up to men like your client. Men who think power means you can destroy anyone weaker without consequence. The courtroom went silent. Even Sutton seemed taken aback by the raw honesty of it. No further questions, he said quietly. Lena stepped down. As she passed Creech's table, the old man leaned forward slightly. This isn't over, he whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. Yes, it is, she replied without stopping. The prosecution rested. The defense called character witnesses, businessmen, community leaders, people who spoke of Creech's generosity and civic contributions. But against the weight of documentary evidence and eyewitness testimony, their words felt hollow. Closing arguments came late in the afternoon. The prosecutor summarized the case with devastating clarity. Creech's lawyers tried to muddy the waters, to create reasonable doubt, but there wasn't any doubt to create. The evidence was overwhelming. Judge Patterson sent the jury to deliberate at 4 o'clock. They returned at 6. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman stood, a weathered rancher who looked like he understood exactly what Creech had done to people like Lena's father. We have, Your Honor. On all counts, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted. Creech's face went white, then red with fury. His lawyers immediately moved for appeal, for mistrial, for anything that might save him. But Patterson shut them down with a single look. Mr. Creech, you have been found guilty of fraud, extortion, conspiracy to commit murder, and numerous other charges. Given the severity and scope of your crimes and the suffering you have inflicted on innocent families across this territory, I hereby sentence you to death by hanging, sentence to be carried out 1 week from today. She slammed her gavel. This court is adjourned. Marshals moved in to take Creech away. As they led him past Lena, he stopped, met her eyes one last time. You've won nothing, he said. I've got money, connections. I'll appeal. You'll hang, Lena interrupted, and everyone will know what you did. That's not nothing. That's everything. Creech was dragged away, still protesting, still believing his money could save him. Caleb put his arm around Lena, felt her trembling with relief and exhaustion, and something like triumph. We did it, she whispered. You did it. You testified, stood up to him. Your father would be proud. I hope so. She leaned into him, letting him take her weight. Can we go home now? Yeah, we can go home. They left the courthouse to find a crowd gathered outside. Journalists, spectators, people who'd lost their own ranches to Creech and wanted to see justice done. When they saw Lena, someone started clapping, then another, then dozens, until the applause washed over them like rain. Lena stood there, tears streaming down her face, and raised her good hand in acknowledgement. These were her people, the ones Creech had victimized, the ones the system had failed. And today, finally, they'd won. Marshal Blackwood arranged their escort back to the ranch, but there was no rush this time, no desperate flight from danger. Creech was locked up awaiting execution, his network collapsing as former allies scrambled to distance themselves. The threat was over. They took their time on the ride home, stopping to rest when Lena needed it, camping under stars that seemed brighter than before. 3 days later, they crested the rise overlooking Caleb's ranch, their ranch now, and saw it spread before them. Home. The place looked different somehow, even though nothing had changed. Maybe it was them who'd changed, Caleb thought. They'd left as two people bound by desperation. They were returning as something else, partners, companions, a team forged in fire. Life settled into a new rhythm over the following weeks. Lena's shoulder healed slowly but steadily. They worked the ranch together, made plans for expansion, talked about the future in ways neither had allowed themselves before. Word came 2 weeks after the trial. Dalton Creech had been hanged at dawn, his last appeals denied, his fortune seized to compensate his victims. Among those victims was Lena's father's estate. The ranch that had been stolen was returned to her, along with significant monetary compensation. "You could rebuild it," Caleb said when the lawyer delivered the news. "Your father's ranch. Make it what it was." Lena looked around at the land they'd defended together, the home they were building. "Or I could stay here, make this what it could be, with you." "You sure? That was your father's dream." "Dreams change. People change." She took his hand. "I spent so long fighting to get back what was taken that I forgot to think about what I actually wanted. Now I know. I want this, us, a life we build together, not one I'm trying to resurrect from the past." "What about the other ranch?" "Sell it. Use the money to expand here. Buy more cattle. Hire hands. Build something new instead of rebuilding something old." Caleb pulled her close, careful of her healing shoulder. "Sounds good to me." Months passed. The ranch prospered. They hired 2 ranch hands, good men who worked hard and kept to themselves. Fences were mended, new pasture cleared, the herd expanded. What had been one man's isolated holdout became a thriving operation. Lena proved to be as good a rancher as her father had taught her to be. She could read weather, doctor sick cattle, manage books and planning with equal skill. Neighbors who'd been suspicious at first came to respect her, and eventually to like her. The marriage that had started as legal protection became real in every way that mattered. They learned each other's rhythms, preferences, the 1,000 small intimacies that build a life together. Arguments came and went. Neither was easy. Both had opinions, but they worked through them, building something stronger than either could have managed alone. A year after the trial, on an evening when the sky burned orange and red with sunset, they sat on the porch together, watching the land darken. "You ever regret it?" Lena asked. "Taking me in that first day, changing your whole life for a stranger?" Caleb thought about it honestly. The pain, the fear, the violence that had followed her arrival, the quiet life he'd lost, the isolation he'd cultivated so carefully. "No," he said, "not even once." "Why not?" "Because that quiet life, it wasn't living, it was just existing, hiding from anything that might hurt me again. You came along and reminded me that some things are worth the risk, worth fighting for." He looked at her. Worth building with someone instead of building alone. Lena leaned her head on his shoulder. "My father used to say a good life isn't measured by what you avoid, but by what you're willing to stand for." "Smart man." "He was, and he'd have liked you, would have respected how you stood for me when you didn't have to." "I had to. Just took me a minute to realize it." They sat there as full dark came, stars emerging one by one overhead. In the distance, cattle load, settling for the night. The wind moved through the grass, carrying the scent of sage and rain that might come tomorrow. It was a simple life in the end, hard work and longer days, small victories and the occasional setback. But it was theirs, built on choice and courage, and the decision to stand together when standing alone would have been easier. Lena had come to the ranch as a stranger fleeing for her life. She'd stayed as a wife, a partner, a woman who'd found home in the last place she expected. And Caleb, who'd sworn off trusting anyone, had found that trust again in the most unlikely way, through a desperate marriage to a woman he barely knew, forged in violence and survival, tempered into something real and lasting. The land that had tested them had also given them everything that mattered: each other, a home, a future built on foundations stronger than fear or isolation. They'd survived the storm. Now came the living, the building, the making of days into years into a life worth having. And that, Caleb thought, watching the stars wheel overhead while Lena's breathing deepened into sleep beside him, was more than enough. It was everything.